past the clouds, over the dark night. She reached up to the sky of stars and caught the red-hot light of the North Star. Opened the earth, walking with blood-soaked feet. She challenged the whip, the gun, the knife. She challenged the fire, pulled from the bodies of slaves, made into laws, prisons, and courts.
Greetings and welcome back. Al Jazeera reports Belgium is the latest European country to announce that it will recognize Palestinian statehood and impose sanctions on Israel. Foreign Minister Maxime Prévost says his country will recognize Palestine this month and impose 12 firm sanctions on Israel. Well, what does this really mean? Is this just one step above being a meaningless gesture? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. Here's the point. You know, we have a tendency to view current events as though they occur in a vacuum, failing to understand the broader historical context in which most events take place. And on this program, my guests and I discuss current issues in the broader historical context in which they occur. On today's episode, the issue before us is Palestine will be recognized by Belgium at the UN session. And Belgium is just one of the latest European countries to get on board. And firm sanctions will be imposed against the Israeli government. Prévost, who is also the deputy prime minister, wrote this on social media Tuesday. Israel will face 12 sanctions from Belgium, Prévost said, including a ban on the import of products from illegal Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank and a review of public procurement policies with Israeli companies. Well, folks, you know, that's all fine, well, and good. But what's the point? As Dave DeCamp reports in antiwar.com, Gaza's health ministry said yesterday that Israel forces killed at least 113 Palestinians and injured 304 over the previous 24-hour period as the Israeli military continues its heavy attacks on Gaza City and strikes elsewhere in the Strip. And on top of that, violent deaths, the health ministry has said, it recorded another 6 starvation deaths, including one child due to the Israeli siege, Famine has been officially declared by the UN and US-backed hunger monitors in the Gaza governorate, which includes Gaza City. So for insight into this, let's turn to my guest. He's an activist and journalist working for peace and social justice. He's the currently active in supporting the human rights struggles of the Palestinian people. He serves on the boards of Canadian Voices for Palestinian Rights and Canadians for Justice in Kashmir. Robert Fantina. Robert, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
So the suffering is happening right now. Yes. The suffering is happening yesterday. Is the declaration of the recognition of a Palestinian state, is that more sizzle than steak? Is that symbolic? What's the point here?
Well, Belgium's recognition does have attached to it some sanctions. Now, the sanctions include not trading with businesses, with Israeli businesses in the West Bank. This is just is part of international law. An occupied country cannot be profiting from businesses in the occupier can't profit from businesses in the occupied territory, but at least it's something. And this review of procurement really means nothing. The other thing that is interesting about this, and the foreign minister mentioned that there is division in the parties. That's why this recognition is a little bit watered down. But many countries, Belgium and some others, are saying that their recognition is a conditional on Hamas not being part of governance of Palestine. Now, I don't know why other countries feel they can tell the Palestinians who it is that is going to govern them. So the recognition is good. It puts some pressure on Israel and the United States, certainly, but these are steps that should have been taken a long time ago, and far more definite and helpful steps need to be taken now and have needed to be taken for the last 22 months, 23 months now almost.
Well, I'm glad you've made that point because that takes me to my next question, which is when this recognition is finally given, if in fact it is actually given, because again, there are conditions around this, as there always are. Will there be actual, first of all, will there be actual territory for the so-called state to exist within, and will it be a sovereign state?
Yeah, these are very good questions. Benjamin Netanyahu has said that none of the settlers who are all living illegally on Palestinian land, and it's about 750,000 of them now, he said that none of them will ever have to leave. Now, if international law is going to be adhered to, they all have to leave. They're all living illegally on stolen land that belongs still to this day to the Palestinian people. So that's how that's going to be accomplished under Netanyahu's regime. It remains to be seen. At the present time, it does not appear that the world governments, especially the Western governments, have the courage to stand up to Israel and the United States, and the courage to live by international law. The international law states very clearly that an occupying nation cannot move its citizens permanently onto the occupied territory, which is exactly what Benjamin Netanyahu says he's done and will continue to do with the new settlements that are being approved right now. So what it's going to take is the leadership of Western nations and certainly other nations in the Middle East to take definite stands to sever ties with Israel, to sanction it, to isolate the country so that it has no choice but to adhere to international law. We don't see that happening yet, but we are seeing some small steps. The other thing that's important to mention is that around the world for the last 23 months, we have seen huge crowds of people consistently coming out in favor of the Palestinians. That support for the Palestinian people, for the rights of the Palestinian people, will eventually filter up to government leaders. It is starting to. We're seeing it a little bit here and there now. The fact that these governments are recognizing Palestine even conditionally is an indication of the strength of the people's movement.
The language here is always of the utmost importance. And so when they say they're going to recognize a Palestinian state, what does that mean? Which is why I asked the question about sovereignty, because sovereignty is the international recognition of a government's ability to control a defined geographic space and use force in order to do so. So all of that to me begs the question, if they're talking about a Palestinian state, but you can't have Hamas there and they have to surrender arms, then what they're telling me is you're not sovereign. And if you're not sovereign, what's the point?
Exactly. I agree with that completely. The fact that these countries are saying that Palestine must be disarmed is just absolutely absurd. Palestine is bordered by a country that has sworn to destroy it. Now, Israeli leaders say, well, Hamas's policy says that Israel will be destroyed. Hamas has no power to destroy Israel, but Israel, as we have seen, not only in the last 2 years, but in the last 70 years, has the power to destroy Israel, as it's doing right now, or attempting to do right now. So the fact that anyone is saying Palestine should be disarmed is just ridiculous. Also, the recognition has to be on the basis of the borders that were established in 1948. Now, we can argue certainly that those were unjust, as I think they were, taking someone's country, dividing it in half or in two, and giving less than half to the people who were already there, and driving out 750,000 of them when they had no say in the decision is completely unfair. But Israel exists, and its borders need to be what the UN unjustly determined they were in 1948. Now, the Israeli government will never agree to this unless there is sufficient pressure put on it by other countries in the world. We're not seeing that yet, but as I mentioned, we're seeing some small steps. But those steps need to be greatly enlarged and greatly hastened if Palestine is going to continue to exist.
I understand that the UN is meeting in about another 10 days or so, but we've been hearing from France. We heard from I think Spain, a couple of other European countries about this effort to recognize a Palestinian state in September. I mean, they've been talking about this. They've been talking about this since maybe July. So again, as I talked about in the open, as children are starving to death, as more innocent people, 113 or so were killed yesterday, why wait when the sense of urgency and the reality of urgency is right now?
Yeah, there's apparently some protocol that has to be done officially at UN meeting, the General Assembly, which is coming up. But your point is so well taken. These countries didn't need to say we are going to recognize Palestine. They can say we recognize Palestine officially. That will be made legal at the September General Assembly meeting. But we now recognize Palestine. We're going to assign ambassadors. We're going to look into how we can assist Palestine now. They don't have to wait till September. And you mentioned the people starving, and in your introductory remarks, you mentioned how it's famine. Now, the United Nations has said this is a famine. Imagine, if you will, for a minute, if there had been a major natural disaster and one area was facing famine. All of the countries that would be rushing to their aid, no one would be hesitating. And if one country tried to stop it, they would be ostracized as a rogue nation, brutal, cruel, inhumane, violating international law, which would all be true. But that's what's happening now, and it's a man-made famine. So these countries that are hesitating to recognize Palestine and saying we'll do it in September at the meeting, there was no reason for them not to say, when they made the decision, yes, we recognize Palestine now, and that will become official at the General Assembly meeting. But these are government officials, it's government bureaucracy, and they're always looking to see what the United States is going to say about a situation and what their people are saying about the situation. They should certainly be looking at what their people are saying, but they need to start ignoring the United States.
First of all, because of the conditional nature of this, at the end of the day, I don't think it's going to happen. France isn't strong enough to stand up against the Zionist government of Israel. Spain isn't strong enough. Belgium isn't strong enough. I don't, which is why I believe they've put the conditions around this that they have. They've conveniently provided outs for themselves because they're talking about taking an action that they're not really intended to take. And if they do, and please prove me wrong, folks, would love for you to prove me wrong. I don't think you have the guts to do it. But if they do, Robert, what does it mean?
If they actually recognize
Yes.
Palestine,
what does it mean? And that gets back to my question of, when you say you're recognizing a state, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm. And as you said earlier, it means that as a sovereign state, that the people within that state are able to select their own form of government. The government is able to raise a military to protect it from its enemies, to defend its people. That's part of what it is, and that it has defined borders. And of course, Palestine does have defined borders. Whether or not these countries will recognize it within those borders remains to be seen. But the idea that the recognition itself has great meaning is false, because it has to be accompanied by other actions. Belgium is doing some, as I mentioned, and as you mentioned, some sanctions, which is good, but these other countries have to take, and Belgium too, have to take strong actions. People are starving to death. It is 2025, and people are starving to death in a man-made famine. Why is this being allowed to happen? Now, also, your point about the fact that these countries are giving themselves an out. It's, for them, doing that is a lose-lose situation. Israel and the United States will be furious with them for making any kind of overture toward Israel. Their people, who in countries that we've mentioned, Canada, England, Spain, France, they are, the people are very, very pro-Palestinian. So if their governments, they first proclaim we're going to recognize Palestine, everyone's happy, and then the people in those countries realize, wait a minute, this isn't a full recognition. There are all kinds of strings attached to this. Then they're going to be angry again. So these governments win nothing but a few days reprieve from either anger from Israel and the United States or anger from their people. So it would be better to take a stand and please the people that put them in office, that they are elected to serve, which is the people within their countries. They're not elected to serve the Israelis or the U.S. government.
There's another reason, and we're going to get to the starvation in just a second. But there's another element of this that, to me, highlighted that this is really nothing but fraud, and that is Macron said in his initial statement, I think it was in July, we're running this through Mahmoud Abbas. And as soon as I read that France says, we're going to do this and we're running this through Abbas, I said, oh, well, this is all you're doing is perpetrating fraud. This is a hoax, because you're running it through somebody who, from the Palestinians' perspective, has zero credibility with the people that he's allegedly supposed to be leading.
Mahmoud Abbas is a traitor to the people of Palestine. It's I've said that before in writing and other places. He is simply a traitor. He has this security coordination with the IDF. Any coordination at all with the IDF is wrong. It's morally wrong. It's legally wrong. One of the tools that occupied people have to resist the occupation is civil disobedience, making the occupation as difficult as it can be for the occupier. But because of the so-called security coordination, when Palestinians in the West Bank or East Jerusalem attempt to resist the occupation, well, Abbas's soldiers, Palestinian soldiers, work with the IDF to arrest them and to repress them. He canceled elections a few years ago with the excuse that he didn't know if Israel would allow Palestinians in East Jerusalem to vote. Well, there was a possibility that several thousand wouldn't be able to vote, but instead of that, Abbas, who knew he would lose the election by his popularity rating was about 19 at that time, 19% out of 100, and so he deprived hundreds of thousands of people of having a voice in their government. So he's simply a traitor. He will go down in history as a traitor. I don't know what he's getting from Israel and the United States now that keeps him in power and that enables him to do this. I don't know how he can look in a mirror or sleep at night. But yes, the fact that Macron is going through him regarding the France's recognition just removes all credibility from France's recognition of Palestine.
There's a piece in Middle East Eye, No Heartbeat. Gaza's pregnant and elderly bear the brunt of Israel's starvation. Israel's blockade pushes Gaza's weakest to the brink, with pregnant women and the elderly among the most vulnerable. And, we've been talking about this for months now. And they say since Israel imposed a total closure of Gaza's border on the 2nd of March, nearly 2 million people in the besieged enclave have entered a new and devastating phase of the war. Wheat flour has become a luxury item, and hundreds have died from hunger and malnutrition. And I wrote a piece a while ago entitled, Palestinians are not starving, they're being starved. And because folks have to understand, even before March 2nd, I don't know exactly how many years Israel has been doing this, but monitoring and controlling the caloric intake of Palestinians so that they could keep people just above the level of starvation. And Carol Asbarum, thank you for your $10 super sticker. Too much too much Gaza news. Israelis are fleeing to Cyprus, South Africa, seeking citizenship. More whites who want a separate state in Cape Town, South Africa. This is news. And thank you very much, Carol. But I think genocide is always news and worth calling attention to. Robert Fantina.
You mentioned the fact that the Israeli government was monitoring the caloric intake of Palestinians. And one Israeli leader, I don't remember who now, said, "Oh, they're not starving the Palestinians; they're just putting them on a diet." This was years ago. Mm-hmm. So now the fact there's famine occurring, a man-made famine. What is the red line for Western nations and other Arab nations too? When do they say this is enough? This can't continue to go on? And I think the reason it continues to go on, partly because of U.S. influence, certainly, but also we can't ignore the racist element of this. The people in Palestine they're Arabs. When Ukraine was invaded a couple of years ago, it was a terrible thing, still a terrible thing. When it was invaded, newscasters went on the news and publicly said things like, "Oh, this shouldn't be happening to them. They drive cars like we drive. They watch Netflix like we drive. It shouldn't be happening to them." So look how racist this is, because when a mainly white population is invaded, it's a horrible thing. When a mainly brown population is invaded, well, there's a reason. It's complicated. There are two sides. No, there are never two sides to genocide. It's just wrong. But that's what we're seeing, a lot of this. And the fact that these people are starving to death. Starvation is a terrible way to die. And children, babies are starting to, pregnant women, the situation you mentioned before, that woman's baby died in utero due to her malnutrition. She wasn't getting enough food to support the fetus growing in her, within her. Older people, the elderly, they don't have the capacity to walk 10, 15, 20 kilometers a day trying to get food, where there are thousands and thousands of people who are also trying to get food from the same place. This is cruelty. These are war crimes that are being committed on a daily basis by Israel. And I won't say the United States is complicit. The United States is guilty. It isn't complicity anymore. The United States is as guilty as Israel of genocide in the Gaza Strip. And that doesn't even mention what's happening in the West Bank right now, which is also a terrible situation. But the fact that people are, you see children when they're scrambling, if they see some flour on the ground that has leaked out from somewhere, and they're scrambling in the dirt to pick up the flour. No one should have to live like this. And yet this is being orchestrated by one nation in the world against another one. And most of the world is okay with it, it seems.
And there's also a generational aspect of this, in that those children who survive, let me take a step back and say this. Now it's reached the tipping point to where, contrary to what a lot of people believe, now you can't feed your way out of this. Mm-hmm. In that there are many now that have reached the brink of no return. Mm-hmm. Their bodies won't even accept food. Mm-hmm. Their bodies will reject food. And so with that, those children, if this thing were to stop tomorrow, there's a whole generation of kids that will grow up in a malnutritioned body. Mm-hmm. So their brains won't properly form. Their limbs won't properly, their skeletal structures will not be what, and not to mention the kids that have been shot by snipers. This is one of the largest generations of children without limbs.
The largest recorded.
Go ahead, Robert.
It's the largest generation of children without limbs from war that's ever been recorded. The IDF soldiers target them. They target their arms, their legs, sometimes their heads, and killing them. And then these children have to go for surgery and amputation without anesthesia, without sanitary conditions. They're out in the field. They're out in a burned out building, but their lives are being saved. But as you said, this doesn't go away if they all get food today. It's not done. This continues throughout their lives. And part of the reason, this is partly Israel's plan to destroy an entire generation of Palestinians, kill those that they can kill, expel some, but they're not letting any leave at the present time, but also make those that live so handicapped by their injuries, by the starvation, that they will probably not have many children. So a generation is lost. And that's why pregnant women and young women of childbearing age are also being targeted. Although we have to mention that no one is not being targeted. Everyone is subject to being bombed at any time in any place. But there is certainly the fact that of the 63,000 people that are estimated to have died, and some estimates put that number much, much higher, about half of them are children. There's a reason for this.
Carol, you're right. Europe does not care, and thank you for that $2. Europe does not care about Gaza, only lip service. You're absolutely right. And Robert, Carol's comment brought me to this question. When we look at what's happening in Gaza right now, and we look at a lot of the tactics that Donald Trump is employing here in the United States, federalizing the military, bringing troops into our cities, cutting the Department of Education, cutting back on social safety net programs, is what we're seeing in Gaza also manifesting itself here in the United States, just slightly different tactics.
Yes, I think we definitely see parallels. In the United States, as you mentioned, Trump is bringing federal troops into cities ostensibly to prevent crime. Now, one of the things he wanted to do was get rid of the homeless in Washington, D.C. He didn't want to get rid of homelessness. He wanted to get rid of the homeless so he didn't have to see them. This didn't resolve the problem of people who are desperate for housing, who are unemployed, underemployed, perhaps mentally ill. It just moved them out of the way. So this is getting rid of the poor. This is also the idea of the white supremacy, which of course is something that the Netanyahu government definitely supports. The racism. This idea of bringing the police into cities, sanctuary cities, to arrest immigrants. What is this saying? They're arresting people who have committed no crimes other than perhaps overstaying their visa requirements, but they're otherwise law-abiding. They've caused no problems. They contribute to the U.S. economy, but because they're not the right color, they are arrested, put into terrible conditions before they're deported back to terrible conditions where their lives are often threatened. So we're seeing dictatorships in working progress. Trump is taking more and more power to himself, as Netanyahu has done. Netanyahu could not survive in his government if he didn't have the right-wing cabinet that he has, which is extremely repressive, cares nothing about international law or human rights, the same way the United States cares nothing about international law or human rights. So we definitely see parallels, and that is why, one of the reasons why the United States is supporting and financing the Israeli genocide of the Palestinian people.
Willie Hicks, thank you very much for that $20 super sticker. And Willie makes the point, Ukraine was not invaded. Ukraine is a corrupt nation that threw its lot in with the West and got dealt with. It was a military operation to stop NATO from spreading where it said it wouldn't. And Willie is expressing a sentiment that I have been saying as well, making the distinction, offensive versus defensive, that the Russian military operation in Ukraine, folks, I understand the definition of invasion. I understand that. But usually you invade for offensive purposes. Mm-hmm. What Russia did in this instance with the military intervention was for defensive purposes. And that's where I make the distinction. And again, I know I am a political scientist. I do know the definition of invasion, but I understand what Willie Hicks is saying, and I agree with him. Robert.
Yes, the United States overthrew the Ukrainian government a number of years ago and installed a new one that the previous one was friendlier to Russia. The new one wasn't, as is in keeping with U.S. policy when it overthrows governments. And then it was Ronald Reagan back in the 80s promised that NATO would not expand any closer to Russia. Well, then here we are with Ukraine applying for NATO membership and the NATO current members looking favorably on that. So NATO, of course, is an outdated, outmoded, and unnecessary organization. It's a tool of the United States to militarily control the world. But Russia was acting defensively. Now, I can't justify any war, but I can certainly understand that the Russian government felt that there was some need to be done about this. And diplomatic overtures to the United States are always a waste of time. And so that's why we are in the situation in Russia and Ukraine that we're in today.
Let's transition. There's a piece that you brought to my attention. Lawyer calls on Canada to speed up visa approvals as situation worsens in Gaza. And you were taking issue with this Canada's immigrant program for Palestinians, you're calling it a farce.
Yes. Canada initially was going to accept 1,000 Palestinians from Gaza, later increased that cap to 5,000. Of those 5,000 have been approved. This is going back a year and a half. Under a little over 1,000, I believe, have come to Canada because it's extremely difficult to get out of Gaza. Now, we have to remember when Ukraine was invaded, and we'll use that word just for lack of a better one right now, but when the Russia-Ukraine war started, the Ukrainians were welcomed to the United States in vast numbers. A couple 100,000 have come, I believe that's the number. The Canadian government chartered planes to bring some of them home, to Canada. So every effort was made to bring Ukrainians who were suffering because of the war to Canada. The same has not been true with Palestinians in Gaza. First, the cap of 5,000, and those that have been able to flee have not done so because of any aid from the Canadian government. Many have spent thousands of dollars, their life savings sometimes, just to get out of Gaza and get to Egypt, where they can hopefully then get to Canada after they've been approved to come to Canada. Also, the requirements for people from Gaza are far more stringent. Anyone who has a scar on their body has to explain where they got their scar. I have a scar. I had my appendix out. It wasn't a matter of I wasn't involved in terrorist activity. People have scars for a variety of reasons. Any job they've had since they were 18 years old has to be recorded. If there was ever any disciplinary action taken against them at any employment, they have to explain why. These are things that the Ukrainians didn't have to go through. You wanted to come to Canada, you came to Canada. So the fact that Canada has made it so difficult for Palestinians to come, and that Palestinians have worked hard, those 5,000, to fill out the forms, to complete all this information about scars and job history and everything else, and then spending their life savings, some of them, to get out. And most of them don't have the money. They might have had a house and money and so on, but it's all been destroyed now. So very few of them are able to leave. And Canada is doing nothing to help them come out, certainly not chartering planes for them like it did for the Ukrainians.
And to that point, in listening to you describe that, it makes me think about the category of people that are considered stateless. Stateless people, refugees that flee their homeland in the midst of crisis with no papers, with no passport, with no birth. They've just got to pick up and go. Children who are born in a country that doesn't have birthright citizenship and whose parents are not from that country. Stateless people. I don't know how many Palestinian refugees fall into that category, but when you start talking about having to explain scar tissue, having to talk about jobs you've had without a vitae or a resume, without being able to go to your laptop and say, "Oh, let me just send you the file." That stateless people, Robert Fantina.
Yeah, statelessness, and there is no place for them. I can give you an anecdotal example. A friend of mine who was from Gaza was able to leave about 7 years ago. It was very difficult for him to leave because he was a young man. He was in his early 20s at that time, but he did leave. Again, very difficult for him, very expensive for him. And he went to India, got his master's degree, and is now very close to having his PhD. But his visa is about to expire. He's applied for an extension, and it's on hold. Now, if it expires, he has to leave India to get a new visa and come back. The only countries where he can get that are in Egypt and Jordan. And right now, those two countries are not allowing Palestinians from Gaza to enter their borders. So where does he go? If he has to leave India, where can he go? He can't go to either of those countries. And those are two that were accepting Palestinians from Gaza, but who else is? The UAE is a possibility, very expensive for him to go there, but he may have to. But why is it that someone who has lived outside of Gaza for 7 years, is well educated, he has a family, wife and children, why is he in this position of statelessness where he can't get a simple extension to a study visa, and there's no place he can go to get it? So this is what, and that's one person, but many people are in that situation, and not just Palestinians. You mentioned those people who leave their countries without their paperwork. Some of them are fleeing in the middle of the night when their neighbors are being killed, and they're not going to look for their paperwork.
Syrians.
Yeah, exactly.
There are people in Syria that are one step ahead of the head chopper, literally.
Right. So all they're going to do is grab their children and run, and then figure out what they're going to do after that. It's a tragic situation, and the immigration, people fleeing countries is increasing as countries around the world are closing their borders more and more. It's cruelty, and it's racist, and it's totally wrong, but it's happening.
You and I, let me see, I guess that was Tuesday. You and I were both on RT talking about the Chinese military parade, as well as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization meeting that took place on Sunday and Monday. And I've really been amazed, not surprised, but amazed at how shallow the so-called analysis from the West has been of the parade. I heard a show out of Baltimore yesterday. I won't. Her name doesn't even really deserve to be mentioned, but she was just saying Vladimir Putin was in Beijing holding a press conference in Beijing, as though that mattered, where he was paying no attention to what he was saying. And they also seem to be focusing on the wrong symbolism. It's as though their interpretation is President Xi is threatening the world with militarism, as opposed to saying President Xi is talking about cooperation, is talking about global economic cooperative expansion, but at the same time sending a very clear message: don't think that we're going to be bullied. We have a military like you have a military.
Yes, the whole theme of the Shanghai Cooperative Organization is economic. It's allowing countries that have been ostracized and kept out of economic prosperity by the West for generations. And we're talking about 40% of the population, at least, which is represented by the Shanghai Cooperative Organization. So, and what Xi is saying, along with Putin and Modi, that they're getting together for the benefit, the economic benefit of a large part of the world, not the Western model, which is to benefit a small part of the world, the elites in the West, and everyone else can basically starve. So that was from the Shanghai Cooperative Organization, Shanghai
Cooperation Organization.
Organization, right? So and then
wait a minute, and the key word there is cooperation.
Right. Yeah. So that was the theme of that meeting. There were about 15 heads of state there. The major ones were from Russia, China, India, and
Turkey.
Turkey. But there were several, as North Korea was there, and so on. So, and there was talk of a banking system, of just economic cooperation throughout. And then the following day after that, there was China's big parade, which it holds every year. So what that was saying was, we want to cooperate with the West. We want to spread the wealth. We want our people to benefit and your people to benefit mutually. But if you, Western nations, try to thwart us, we are prepared to deal with you very effectively and very efficiently. And here's how we're going to do it. So the weaponry that they displayed was really quite amazing. It was frightening, but it was really amazing the kinds of things they can do. A supersonic missile that can go from Beijing to Washington, D.C. in a matter of just a very short amount of time. The underwater missiles, there's so much. So that was sent a warning to the West, and especially to Donald Trump, who is trying to be the world's bully. The United States traditionally has been, but he's really taking it to extremes. And China said during its parade that, okay, you're flexing your muscle, but look at us. You want to think twice before you cross us.
You might want to think more than twice. Because one of the things that stood out to me as I watched the parade was, and as I did just a quick compare and contrast between what China was demonstrating and what the U.S. demonstrates, is all the soldiers that were marching in the street, all the weapons that were being brought down the street, and China's economy is still striving. The United States can't put on display nearly the firepower that China did, because to a certain degree, the United States military plan is a different plan, aircraft carriers and all that kind of stuff. But the U.S. economy is in the toilet. So the question becomes military prowess at what cost?
Yes, and the United States doesn't care about that. It doesn't care that people don't have jobs, don't have health care. Some cities in the United States, you can't even drink the water that comes out of the tap. But that's okay as long as the United States has enough firepower to destroy the world 10 times when its nearest competitor can only destroy the world 5 times. So, and of course, the goal is to make it 20 times. So this is, as the Russian government doesn't have nearly the amount of firepower and weaponry that the U.S. has. It could only destroy the world maybe twice, but that's enough. And I think the Chinese government recognizes that, and that's got enough. It's enough for a deterrent against anybody, and it will spend its effort and its money to increase its business technology, its academic credentials, improve its schools and infrastructure and so on, because the Chinese government isn't beholden to military lobby groups as the Chinese government is, as the United States government is. So it's more of a, we talk about, Russia's a communist repressive regime and everything. Well, is it? Let's look at reality here. There isn't a country on the planet that doesn't have human rights issues. We know that. But to say that the Russian or the Chinese human rights record is worse than the United States, I would argue that's not the case.
Well, interestingly enough that you mentioned that, because I was talking to my students today about authoritarian governments. And I said, the Western narrative is that Xi Jinping is an authoritarian. I said, well, he is a very strong leader, but he does have a communist party that he has to answer to. Yes, Vladimir Putin is a very strong leader, but he's also a very effective politician because he has a Politburo that he has to answer to. And if he doesn't give the right answers, I said the only one that you could probably put in that category would be Kim Jong-un. Mm-hmm. I said the others. I said now, and what is more authoritarian than sending the military into Washington, D.C., sending the military into Los Angeles, threatening to send the military into Chicago and Oakland? What's more authoritarian than an executive order banning birthright citizenship? What's more authoritarian than rounding up undocumented immigrants and saying, I don't care what the judges say, I'm still going to send these people elsewhere without due process. What's more authoritarian than that?
And some Congress people have said, oh, well, they're not citizens. They're not entitled to due process. The Constitution says
That's
clearly
wrong.
anyone who is on U.S. soil is entitled to due process. And when the one gentleman, the first gentleman from Columbia University, whose name escapes me at the moment, who was arrested, a pro-Palestinian activist, and he was on a student visa, it was arbitrarily revoked. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, even said he's committed no crimes, but his political beliefs are dangerous. So people are being arrested for their political beliefs. I'm a U.S. citizen, and I usually go down twice a year to see family. I'm not going now. I don't feel safe going to the United States because of my activism.
What's more authoritarian than that? An American citizen afraid, well, as I have traveled, look at what the government did to Dan Kovalik as he was coming back from a conference in Venezuela. He gets detained at the airport. They take his laptop, they take his phone, they copy, they image those those pieces of equipment. Professor Danny Shaw, coming back from a Palestinian film festival, gets detained for hours in Chicago. What's more authoritarian than that?
Right, and that's the United States has fostered this myth for generations: the greatest country in the world, freedom, beacon of peace and freedom, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That it's always been a myth, but now that myth is being torn off, that mask is being torn off. People are seeing their friends and relatives, co-workers arrested by these masked, heavily armed men. 5 and 6 of them coming to get some 30-year-old woman who's just working in her office or whatever it might be. This is frightening to people, and that's certainly part of the plan. But talk about authoritarianism. We're seeing it in the United States frequently. I wrote an article recently on fascism and the 14 points of fascism. Umberto Eco's 14 points, and we're seeing all those happening in the United States, and it's not new. They've been ongoing for some time, and now they're accelerating.
And Kevin Baptiste, just for accuracy, I was never on the no-fly list. I was on the watch list. Those are two different things. And I don't know if I'm still on the list or not, but I can tell you I have not had a problem. I haven't had the problems traveling over about the last 6 to 7 months that I had for about 14 years. But I was never on the no-fly list. I was on the watch list, which is might even be worse, because at least on the no-fly list, you can't fly, so you don't bother going to the airport. Yeah. As opposed to being on the watch list and you go to the airport and you get harassed for 4 hours before they allow you on the plane. Final question for you, Robert, and that is, listening to what you just articulated also just made me think about the narrative and the Western media narrative. And I've been saying to folks for quite a while, in many instances, the disinformation campaign that we hear on a number of these shows not only has to do with what they say, but what they omit in their analysis. And so the lack of context. I was watching Ali Veshi a couple nights ago, and he was going on ad nauseum about Ukraine. Never mentioned Maidan, the Maidan coup, never mentioned the Minsk I Accord, never mentioned the Minsk II Accord, never mentioned the negotiations in Turkey, never mentioned Putin saying to Biden when they were in Geneva, we can put this to rest right now. All you have to do is implement Minsk. We've already negotiated this. No mention of that. When Donald Trump came in and said, I can end this in a day, he was right, because all he had to do was implement Minsk. But Angela Merkel told us they never intended for that to be implemented. They were lying all along. And that's why Putin now says, I'm not going through this ceasefire foolishness with you people again. Been there 3 times. You burn me every time.
And that's what we continue to see, that bias in the news media where they only tell one side of the story. With the Gaza situation, it was the terrorists killing all these innocent Israelis, when of course we know today that a lot of them, not most, but a lot of them were killed by Israelis themselves. They didn't want to take hostages. When the initial report about beheading babies, and Biden said that, and a couple hours later, his spokespeople said, "Well, we have no evidence of that, but that's what Netanyahu said." But that's not the big news. The big news is the big shocking news. Oh, look, the terrible thing they did. So the nuances of the situation are never mentioned. And with genocide, there are no new nuances. One country is slaughtering the other people. There's nothing to consider about that. There's nothing to ponder. Well, which side is right? Which side is wrong? It's very clear what's happening there. But you mentioned earlier about the Palestinians who aren't dying; they're being starved to death. The news often talks about X number of Palestinians died and 5 Israeli soldiers were killed. It just sort of happened to the Israelis or to the Palestinians, but the maliciousness in the poor victims of the IDF. So this, you said earlier, also words matter, and this is one instance among many where they do. But as you said, the analysis is often one-sided. It's you have to see who's benefiting from it. The corporate-owned media is in the pocket or in bed with the U.S. government, and so they're going to say what the government wants them to say. That's why independent media is so important, and also citizen journalism. People in Gaza actually taking pictures and videos and sharing with the world what's happening there. That's what's really important. Then people can see for themselves that Palestinians aren't dying. They're being savagely killed.
Robert Fantina, my man, as always, thank you so much for your time. Greatly appreciate that analysis and look forward to having you back.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure. And I too look forward to being with you again.
Folks, again, thank you to Robert Fantina. Go to you can check out his webpage, robertfantina.com. You can go to robertfantina.com. Brilliant books. His last book on Kashmir is incredibly enlightening. Thank you all so much for listening and watching the Connecting the Dots podcast. Stay tuned. John Kiriakou is going to join us tomorrow. John Kiriakou will join us on Friday. That will be a new episode. Follow, subscribe, leave a review, share the show. Please share the show. We got to get to 10,000. Some of y'all are kind of leaving me out to hang here on not sharing the show and subscribing. We really need your help here in order to keep this thing moving forward. And remember that this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge. Talk without analysis is just chatter. And we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. We are rhetoric free. See y'all tomorrow with John Kiriakou. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a wonderful, blessed remainder of your day. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.